The spirit of these sessions is learning. I assure you that much. You might not directly be involved with legal metrology. You might be working in a contracts process which does not require regular understanding of regulatory updates. But I assure you that every one of these conversations will add tremendous value to your life. Over to you, Amanya.
So hi everyone. I will be talking on two regulations which has come up. One is in relation to the legal metrology packaged commodities amendment, and the other is the food safety and standard labeling and display regulation. The reason I have choose this topic is because the legal metrology packaged commodity is trying to lessen the burden, compliance burden for many manufacturers. And these food safety and standards labeling and regulations are trying to impose certain labeling requirements for various food business operators. And these need to be complied. So these food safety regulations need to be complied by July 2022. And the legal metrology package commodity rule needs to be complied by April 2022. So it's very close. So these labeling regulations, these are affecting us in a daily basis. When we are going to buy these biscuits or chips packet, all these regulations do come into play. So when I started reading these regulations, before that, I never used to check the labels, whether what informations are present in that. But after reading these regulations and going more deep into it, I started reading those. So these will be the topic covered by me. First will be the introduction, where I'll be introducing the FSSAI, which is the Food Safety Authority of India, and also briefly discuss about the legal metrology. And after that, I'll be mentioning what was the reason why these amendments have come up, followed by followed by a discussion on the key amendments under the Food Safety and Standards Regulation. Apart from that, I'll also be mentioning about a global report which has been issued by the University of North Carolina, because it mentions that the warning label, if it's mentioned in the front packet, it's really useful because most of the people don't buy those. And the next is I'll be discussing on the key amendments under legal metrology package commodities, and after that the impact of amendments, followed by a conclusion and Q&A session. So we all know in 2015 Maggie was banned. So what was that authority which banned Maggie during 2015? Food Safety and Standards Authority of India, which is administered by Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, and it is responsible to maintain food safety in India. This is the authority which laid down the labeling regulations so that these food business operators of food, those involved in food manufacturing, they mention all the labeling requirements which are required in these food items. Now, why this labeling regulations have come up is that because earlier it just used to cover the food items which were packed, but now it is also covering those e-commerce. It is also covering those entities which like food service establishments which has 10 or more outlets in different locations. Apart from that, then the Legal Metrology Act is administered by Department of Consumer Affairs, and it is empowered by, so central government is empowered to make rules under Legal Metrology Act, and it has laid down certain packaging requirements through the legal metrology, and they have made certain changes in the legal metrology package amendment rules. As I have already mentioned, that legal metrology, the package commodities needs to be complied by 1st April 2022, and these food safety and standard labeling and display regulation needs to be complied by July 2022. So these are the key amendments under the Food Safety and Standards Labeling and Display Regulation 2020. First one is that the name on the front pack needs to indicate the true nature of food contained in the package, which means that if you're buying a Lay's chips packet, you have to mention the true nature. So it contains a potato chips. That has to be mentioned, whether you lay down the brand name or not, but you have to mention that it's a potato chips. The 2018 advertising regulation did used to mention that in case you are mentioning a brand name and it is not clear if the brand name does not indicate clearly what is the nature of food item, then a description has to be mentioned. But now, through this regulation, it is applicable to all the food business operators. The second one is non-veg food item labels to now display a brown triangle with a square with brown outline. So earlier it was a brown circle which was there. Now it has changed to brown triangle. So if we see as an impact, who will be impacted? So I know that HUL is manufacturing Nor chicken soup. So now they have to change their labeling requirement. Now they have to change that labeling display. So they have to bring in different internal processes and check in their system. The third one is food items not meant for human consumption to now display a cross symbol in black color within a square with black outline. So those items like diya, which are not meant for human consumption, which are used for puja purpose, or even pet foods. So Mars is a very renowned business with these pet foods. Now you need to mention these symbols in your labeling before you are selling these items before July 2022. You need to comply by this. The next is allergen information need to be mandatorily displayed on the labels. So allergen information, earlier also these regulations used to mention that some warning has to be mentioned. For example, the warnings related to low gluten, or even if under the fortification of food regulation, it used to mention that if it contains lot of iron, that has to be mentioned. But now through this regulation, these allergen information, they have picked up certain items which comes under these allergen information. For example, peanuts, tree nuts, cereals, soy, even milk items, fish, egg. These are under allergen information, and these has to be mentioned. So I have recently seen Kisan peanut butter. I have seen that they are mentioning it separately allergen information. It contains peanut because they have a food ingredient called peanut in the peanut butter. The next is date of expiry or use by to be displayed on food item label. So date of manufacturing is always mentioned in the food item, but what we see mostly is best before date, not the use by or expiry date. Now they want the expiry date to be mentioned. So the difference between best before date and expiry date is that in best before date indicates that this food item is still safe for consumption, but its quality might have been diminished. But expiry date says that after this particular date, you can't use this particular food for consumption. So this will definitely help consumers in determining when exactly to stop using such food item. And if we see from a industry's perspective, now they all have to mention the expiry date, whether they mention the best before date or not. The next is brand owner must mandatorily display its complete address and name. Now, so we have seen that most of the industries do mention their brand name, brand owner's name, but there are some industries who used to manufacture through third-party contracts, and they used to shy away from consumer complaints because the previous regulation gave them an option that if they want, they can mention the name of their brand owner. If they want, they don't. If they don't want to mention the name of the brand owner, they can just mention the manufacturing name. So now if we see from perspective of Namaste India Food Limited, it is producing cheese, milk based food products. So if their food item contains this plant stenol esters, they have to mandatorily display in their packet that it has certain warnings and certain warnings like it's not unsafe for pregnant lady. It is not how much gram can be used for a particular adult for a particular day. So all these details has to be provided. Even the date and type of manufacture of meals served in airlines or railways need to be displayed on the packed items. So these airlines and railways, we often, when we travel from airlines and railways and buy these food items, I have definitely seen the date is mentioned, but I have never seen the time is also mentioned in such packets. So now they have to mention the date and time. Moreover, if it's a non-veg food item, now they have to change that logo as well in their item. So there will be a very different process. So now Air India has to also comply with these, or any railways or any other airlines, even they have to comply and bring processes in place. So there is a lot of industry which are getting impacted. Next is declaration of calorific value. The threshold has been mentioned that it applies to those industry which has a central license, and if it has 10 or more outlets in different locations. Just this is mentioned. Now this establishment has a compliance that they need to mention the calorific value. Also has to mention that an average active adult requires 2000 kcal energy per day. However, calorie needs may vary. So that has to be mentioned in their display. And these regulations are also mentioning an exception that this does not apply to caterers or those companies which operate for less than 60 days in a year. But there is one problem. So when I mentioned about the threshold, what are the food service establishment which came in your mind? Domino's, Pizza Hut. Exactly. Even this came in my mind as well. But then I saw the definition which is mentioned for food for catering purpose, which states that it means those food of use in restaurants, canteens, schools, hospitals, quick service restaurants, home delivery operators, caterers, and similar institutions where food is offered for immediate consumption. So at one side, they are mentioning an exception of catering. In the other side, they are defining food for catering purpose, where they are mentioning that quick service restaurants and even restaurants are under foods for catering purpose. Then what comes under food service establishment? This becomes a gray area in this regulation. Now these food business operators also have to calculate the recommended dietary allowance and display it on the label. So recommended dietary allowance represents the average daily nutrients required for a particular adult. And these RDA, recommended dietary allowance, has to be calculated as per the Indian Medical Research Council. In case that nutrient is not present in different in this Indian Medical Research Council report, then they have to mention through the World Health Organization. They have to go by those World Health Organization statements. Next is modification in manner of labeling of certain products. So we know Bunge is involved in this edible oil. Now there has been slight change in the labeling requirement of Bunge. If they are involved in admixture of edible oil, they have to mention that it is a multi-source edible vegetable oil, that too in front pack. So earlier the regulation used to mention that they have to mention it in the label right below the brand name. But now it is specifically stating that we have to mention it right in the front pack, and we have to mention it as multi-source edible vegetable oil and not blended edible vegetable oil. Now, if we come to e-commerce, buying, so e-commerce means buying and selling of goods in services over digital or electronic network. Now, here also mandatory display of information has to be made. Even the 2018 regulations stated that these e-commerce have to display these labelings. But what extra has been mentioned is that they have to mention these information except the batch number, lot number, best before date, expiry date, date of manufacturing and packaging. So if what happens if they are not mentioning the expiry date, and if they are delivering the same to the consumer, the expiry date passes, what happens then? So those gaps have not been resolved. But what I have observed in Amazon, when I went to the Amazon grocery, I checked, they were mentioning a legal disclaimer which stated that while we work to ensure that product information is correct, on occasion these manufacturers may alter their ingredients. They also mentioned that we recommend you do not solely rely on these information and always read labels or warnings and directions before using or consuming a product. So this definitely means these Swiggies or Zomatos or Amazons, they are using the safe harbor provision of IT Act section 79, because they are clearly mentioning that please contact the manufacturer if you are facing any issue with a particular food item. So there are different penalties for these food business operators in case they don't display the true nature of the food item, or they do not provide for the allergen information. So first offense, they are fined 3 lakh rupees, and for a repeated offense, their license can get cancelled, and they have to pay a double fine with 1 lakh fine, which is on a daily basis, which they have to pay. And the court which issues the penalty, they can mention the offender's name, residence in a newspaper at the offender's expenses. And there has not been any change in the penalties with respect to this regulations. So now this is a global food research program report by the University of North Carolina. This report states that in the front pack, so when a warning is mentioned in the front pack of the label, it is more effective to these humans, and it helps the humans to understand what is bad for consumption, and they might not even buy those foods. So countries like Thailand, Sri Lanka, Iran, Brazil, Israel, Mexico, Ecuador, Peru have followed these regulations. But in fact, even in Chile, what happens is those food items which are not good for consumption for kids, they don't even show or display that in their advertisement from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. Now, what the other thing is that these big countries, which has large number of food industries like India, like Europe, or like America, they are in somewhat resisting this kind of change that they should mention warning labels in the front packet. Because definitely in 2018, this Brazil and Chile study indicated that when the warning is provided in the front pack, it definitely has an impact on the consumers, and the sale of these unprocessed food gets decreased. So for marketing and operational reasons also, these big industries have resisted to bring these front pack labelings. So the key amendments under the Legal Metrology Package Commodities Amendment Rules 2021. So before we start with the amendments which have been provided in these regulations, we just want to mention what pre-packed commodity exactly means. So commodities which are packed, and that package has a predetermined value, and that value cannot be altered without that package being sold or opened at the time of sale. So for example, sunglasses cannot be considered as a pre-packed commodity, but detergents, paints, baby food, etc. can be considered as a pre-packed commodity. So the first thing is that Rule 5 have been omitted, and it has provided for a relief to the manufacturers, because earlier there was standard weights and measures present in it. For example, if it's a biscuit of if you are manufacturing a biscuit, you have to, the minimum weight was 25 grams. And even if manufacturer wants to uh, manufacture a biscuit which is of 20 grams, he didn't have that option. He had to abide by the standard regulations, which was mentioned in the Rule 5. But now they have the option to package a particular food item as per their wish. They can conduct a market survey, and they can see how consumers are or what type of package or what type of weight the consumer wants to buy. The second one is the so in relation to the first point only, like P&G is manufacturing Ariel detergents. Then HUL has brew coffee. Even Bunge has edible oil. RSPL has Ghari detergent. these were manufactured in certain quantities. The quantities were mentioned in schedule 2. But now these manufacturers don't have to follow or abide by all the weight requirements which are mentioned there. They can conduct a market survey and then they can package it in accordance with their requirement or what they feel is the best for consumers. So this has definitely given a relief to the manufacturer from that perspective. The second one is quantity of packed items to be represented in a simple manner. So earlier, when there was a particular pack of food items or any other items sold, they were sold in numbers or units and they were just denoted in N or U. But now, and even if they were denoted in some other format like dozen, unit or piece, it would mean that they are violating such rules. But now the quantities can be expressed in terms of numbers, units, piece, and dozens. The third one is, so earlier this month and year of manufacture of product needs to be mandatorily mentioned was not there. Even the pre-packaged commodities, date of pre-packaging of the particular commodity or date of importing can also be mentioned in the through the previous regulations. But now through these key amendments, they have to mandatorily mention just the month and year of manufacture of the products. And the last one is the unit sale price has to be mentioned in prescribed format. So these unit sale price plays a very important role in consumers' life, because suppose there are two brands, brand A and brand B, and brand A is selling 2.5 liters of oil in MRP 700 and brand B is selling 1.5 liters of oil in rupees 500. So how will a consumer understand that which price is less? So for that purpose, now they have mentioned that unit sale price has to be mentioned in prescribed format, which means when the brand A is mentioning that MRP 700 is the price for 2.5 liters, they also have to mention that for 1 liter, how much it costs. So how much it costs for per liter, or if it's a item which is in which weighs less than gram, then how much it costs per gram or per kg. So impact of amendments, both these amendments are having significant impact. So for if we see from an e-commerce perspective, the labeling regulation are impacting the e-commerce, as now they have to reframe their internal system and control in place, since they have to first determine which are the restaurants which are having more than 10 outlets or central license. They have to ask these questions to those restaurants to whom they are onboarding, and then they have to update their portal with those calorific value of each meal and ensure that the seller provides for labeling information in their portal. So lot of back-end work is required to be done by these e-commerce entities in terms of displaying requirements and labeling. In terms of labeling, they just need to display those labeling information in their website. The other is the food business operators and food service establishment. So there is a change of non-veg logo. Expiry date also needs to be mentioned. So now they have to ensure that this quality of food is not getting diminished after the best before date, because it is still expiry date that they have to ensure that these food quality does not get diminished. So does that mean that these food business operators also have to re-strategize the way they are making the food item, or they have to choose what date they have to mention, whether it should be before the best before date? And these food business operators are also required to provide for the allergen information. They have to provide for these calorific value. From legal metrology package commodity perspective, they can conduct a market survey and determine what suits best for its consumers in terms of detergents, or if it's an HUL, they can see what in terms of coffee, what grams of coffee best suits the consumer to be sold, and they can manufacture those in accordance with their requirement. So overall, both these regulation is heavily impacting the food business operators and establishments. And while there are a lot of labeling requirements they need to adhere to under labeling regulation, legal metrology rules are giving some relief in terms of Rule 5 of the legal metrology amendments. The next is consumers. So consumers are definitely having a positive impact because they will be able to make the informed choices. They know they will be getting the warning labelings. They will be able to determine what is best for them, what they need to buy. So definitely consumers are having a very positive impact uh, from the perspective of both these amendments. And the last one is manufacture of pre-packaged. So manufacturers of pre-packaged commodities are also benefiting because so omission of Rule 5 will now help manufacturers to choose that in what quantity they want to pack a particular item. So this is having a positive impact on manufacturers and giving them a relief from the standardized way of packaging. So these are some food for thoughts. What can be the effect which the consumers are having? The second is, does this have an increased benefits to consumer, this increased benefits to consumers imply additional compliance burden on food industry, and the compliance readiness of the industry is affected by these amendments.
So from the consumer's perspective, I was just saying that it's going to have a positive impact on them, and they'll be able to make more informed decisions, and they're going to be more aware while purchasing products, and take notice of the warning labels and make decisions accordingly. And on the flip side, this is from the manufacturer's perspective, there's the uncertain element that they don't know how the consumers will be reacting now and what the purchasing pattern will be.